What's up, guys? Welcome to Mike It Yourself. And for today's video, what we're going to cover is battery, I guess. So over the last week, I've been riding my Road Glide into the office, and when I was starting the bike, sometimes, not all the time, I was getting a really hard start, a sluggish start. Basically what was happening is it almost seemed like the battery was dead. So I'd hit the start button and it would either just click and then go to a slow start, or it wouldn't start and I would release it and then I would click it again. When I hit it the second time, it started up. So I thought that was really weird. Now, you know, what you'll want to do if you're having those problems is you're going to want to look at your battery. And there are a couple of reasons why your bike will do that. Dead battery, of course, right? Or a dying battery. And an old battery will do it as well. And there's a third thing that we need to check on kind of regularly, and it's not the easiest to do with the Road Glide, and that is check for corrosion, because moisture, things get in there and you'll get corrosion buildup on your battery terminal. And if you do get that, then the contact isn't as great. So you could have a perfectly good battery, but if you have corrosion there, then it takes away from that battery's ability to start your bike. So here's a way to test your battery, at least to get kind of started, and then you want to dig a little deeper. So let's take a look at what this looks like when you test it out. Damn it. Okay, so we've got multimeter ready here, and we're gonna switch it over to volts because that's what we're gonna check. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cheat. So instead of having to remove everything, which I've kind of moved stuff out of the way, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my charging port for the battery. Now this one isn't the stock one. This is one that I put in, and what I did is it's right to the battery, right? So there is nothing in between here. So there's nothing that's gonna take away or give or whatever, right? And so by putting my leads here, and I'm doing this with one hand, so forgive me a little bit here. When I put my leads in there, you can see I get 12.5 volts. Now, we're going to want to test this out, because what we're going to look for is how bad that voltage drops. So this is a battery tester here that I got from Harbor Freight a long time ago, and this is able to check not only 6-volt batteries but also 12-volt batteries in your charging system. It doesn't do anything crazy as far as a thorough checkout. It just gives you voltage readings, and then you're able to place a load on the battery to see whether or not the battery is dying, right? Like it's not able to hold the charge effectively. And the reason I'm showing this is, one, if we have to pull the battery out to test it, then we'll use this device here. But I want to look at the scale here before we test the starting on the bike. And on this, you know, normal voltage on a battery is 12 volts. And we're seeing that already, as you saw on the multimeter. And then while it's running, you want it about, 14 or so volts for charging. That tells you your charging system is fine. That applies to both bikes and cars. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some models out there that are going to be a little bit different. In general, we're going with, what is kind of the standard. Now, if your voltage on its own is about 10 volts, then they're saying that your battery is weak, right? Ultimately, you should not see your battery drift into the bad area, right? So you see this lower scale, that's the 12 volt, and that starts really at about 9 volts. So if your battery dips below 9 volts, then essentially it's not so great. Okay, so now that we know what we're looking for as far as the voltage drop goes, we don't want that to drop below 9 volts, right? So I'm going to go ahead and give the bike a crank, and let's see how much it drops. We're going to get some drop. That is expected, but you shouldn't get it below 9 volts. Okay, so I don't know if you caught it or not, but in that startup, it did actually touch 7 volts for a hot second there. and it's quick or whatever. Now, you know, that potentially could mean we have a bad battery here, but we need to do some more investigation, right? We need to look a little further. So what we're going to do now is, now we're going to have to dig and take a look at the top of the battery, because our next step will be to check for corrosion. And on top of checking corrosion, because if there is any, we're going to have to remove the battery to clean that corrosion up, and then we're going to want to recharge the battery, make sure we got a good charge, and do a load test on it as well. Okay guys, so we've got most of the stuff out of the way here, and as I was lifting up, so you can see terminal kind of there, and then if you peek around there, you can kind of see the positive, but it's not easy to see with this stuff in the way, so it's easier to remove this stuff to gain access to your battery, because you're probably going to need it anyways. But then you can take a better look at your terminals to see whether or not you've got corrosive issues. And guess what, guys? We got corrosion. All right, so chances are the corrosion is going to be our issue. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull this battery out. We're going to use a mixture of water and baking soda to neutralize the acid and the corrosion. Clean it off with a toothbrush or a wire brush, whatever you have handy. And then you can put protectants on afterwards, like Walmart and AutoZone. They carry sprays and different things you can put on the terminals to coat it to help reduce the chances of corrosion. It doesn't 100% deny corrosion. Over time, it's probably going to happen. So let's get the battery out and let's clean it up. Okay, so here's our corrosion. It seems to only be on the negative terminal, so that's, I guess, better than it being on both. So I've got our mixture here of the water and baking soda, and I've got both a brass brush and a regular toothbrush. So I'm going to just mix this around a little bit, and we'll go ahead and, just pour it slowly on the battery terminal, and then we'll want to scrub it. Like I said, you can use a regular toothbrush or a brass brush. I've got them both. The regular toothbrush works a little bit easier in getting into these tight areas, just because there's not as much flexibility as with the brass brush. The other thing is, you want to also clean whatever was connected here. So your the battery cable, that termination you want to clean, and then any additional terminations you had hooked up to it, because corrosion can spread. So you just want to make sure you got that all cleaned off. So now that we've scrubbed that down, we'll go a little bit more to kind of clean it. And you can see there's a lot less. It's not perfect. I'm going to keep at it so that way I get it all off, and then we'll be able to put it back on the bike once we clean the terminations on everything else that was connected to it. So I'll bring you back. Alright guys, so I didn't charge the battery. I just hooked this up to kind of see where we're at, and we're sitting in the green pretty good, so it looks like we've got a good solid charged battery. So we're going to run the test, and the way this tester works is you just push this load switch to the side, and you hold it for 10 seconds and watch the meter. So you don't want it to get into the bad area as you run it. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and let's see how I do this with let me sit you down here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the battery test, and let's see how we look. 1,000, 2,000, 6,000, 7,000. Okay, so we really didn't even break into the week, so I'd say that this is still a good battery, and we can go ahead and reinstall it without worrying of it failure. So it was most likely the corrosion that was causing my issues. So nice and easy fix, saved me a good amount of money. So question to all my Harley friends out there, normally it's very straightforward how to read the date of a battery to see how old it is, and in this particular case, normally you you get your label, and it just gives you, either they would check off the month and the year, or something, but I don't see anywhere here on this battery that tells me what the date of the battery is. Now it does tell you the warranty, so this is true. This is an actual Harley Davidson, battery, that it's good for 24 months from the date of the new vehicle purchase. So my bike being a 2017, we're way beyond that, and then it's 12 months after the over-the-counter purchase, which we didn't buy this; it came in the bike. So either way, I'd be hosed if I have to replace this battery. It'd be out on my own. But things to note is that it is a 405 cold cranking amp battery, so you want to kind of stay around that. You'll find batteries online for pretty cheap, but they won't have those cold cranking amps, so you're not going to get a very good battery. So something to pay attention to, looking forward. So let's I'm going to go clean those terminals, and then we're going to install the battery and do another test. So don't you hate when you have a plan put together and that plan just falls apart by simply taking the first step of trying to put stuff together? Okay, so I had a plan. We did all the work on the battery, that's all cleaned up, and in the process of putting things together, it was kind of like that domino effect where one thing goes wrong, the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. So long story short, in the process of putting my battery back into the bike, I made multiple mistakes. The first one was as I was dropping it into the bucket, I snagged my rear suspension airline, so ripped that out of the T, and of course the bike dumped, not on its head or anything like that, just went low on the shocks. And then I had plans that I had to leave, so I ended up having to have to come back, fix the airline after finally getting the battery in its place and kind of putting the terminals on, only to realize that I put it all together and forgot to attach the positive cable to the battery. So after tearing it apart a second time, everything is all nice and together now. You saw it pass the charging test, so now we're going to try the starting test and see what our end result is. And again, we're looking for it to not drop below 9 volts during the start. So let's take a look. Okay, as expected, we're getting 12 point whatever, 12 plus volts reading on our little charging port that I'm using to measure the battery. And we're going to give this thing a crank over. Alright, so obviously the cleaning of the terminals wasn't the fix, and we're still dipping below that 9 volt, although it still tested good on its own with that simple tester. So I'm not convinced that it's a battery problem. So I want to check one other place that the battery and the starter are tied in, and that is right at the starter. And the reason I'm just thinking about this is typically the place where you would hook up your jumper, your jump box, if you had a dead battery, which I've done in the past, and it's typically covered by like a rubber boot. And I'm wondering, if I didn't put the boot on, did it get corrosion in it? So let's take a look. All right, so this is the point that I'm talking about, and I'm not seeing anything major. but it won't take but a few minutes to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery, undo that bolt, give it a quick scrub, spray some contact cleaner on there, and then put it back on to see if that resolves our issue. So last ditch effort, let's give it a run. All right, so let's give it another run. Let's see what our starting voltage is. I didn't charge it after that last attempt, but it shouldn't have been much dead, if anything, after that. So we got 15 or 12.57, so that's pretty close. So we'll give it a start and see if it drops. So you heard that? It kind of hung up in the starting position. So I don't know what the story is with that. Yeah, I think we got a bad battery. All right, I'm gonna give this thing one more chance. So we're gonna recharge the battery. If you look here, I just put it on the charger and it's at the bottom, so it's acting like it's a dead battery. So what we'll have to do is we'll test that out. Now, if you noticed, it's jumping pretty quick, so we'll see. It'll either crank right up and not dip after this thing's fully charged, or we'll see the same thing where it dies very easily, very quickly, and again, that just means we got a bad battery. So I'm hoping for the best, planning for the worst. Okay, so we have a full charge. We're gonna give this one final run and it'll tell us whether or not the battery is the problem or not. We've checked all of the contacts, everything's clean at this point, down to the starter. So let's see what happens. All right, so we've got 12.97 on the display. Let's see what we get. Okay, well, so there you go. You saw on that startup, it did not drop below 9 volts. It did, in fact, I don't think it even got below 10 volts. So that's exactly what we wanted to see. It was actually a little bit better. It looks like my actual issue wasn't necessarily the corrosion on the battery, but that was, I'm sure, contributing to it. It was the corrosion that was, and it was very little on the starter. So that, coupled with the need to recharge the battery, seems to resolve the problem. Started right up, no hesitation, and again, didn't dip below the 9 volts. So looks like we've got a fix. I'm going to monitor it for a couple of weeks just to make sure we're solid. But again, this is just kind of sharing with you the process of troubleshooting the battery. And by doing this process, as long as the battery is good, which it should be, save myself a couple $100, right? So it's like, depending on which battery you want, for this bike at least, you could pay anywhere from about $100 for the cheap stuff, all the way up to $200+ on a higher performance battery. So money saved just by money saved by just doing some simple troubleshooting. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up. If you enjoy my content, become a subscriber. And if you don't want to miss out on that next video, hit the notification bell. And until that video does come out, I hope to see you in the win.